Preface. This world was made to be free in. David White. There is no more concise packaging of insight, intelligent warning and hope applicable to this moment in our shared history and the far, far superior way to navigate it, which exists nor ever will exist on this planet in one book. If anyone ever manages to write a shorter book that says more, losing nothing, they will be advancing my work for me. If and when our species gets over the threshold from where we are teetering dangerously on the edge of our myopic coming-of-age drama and existential demise into the incredible future that is waiting for us, it will be by making real contact with some version of what is being said here. This book is neither short nor overly simple. Given the sheer amount of competing noise and complexity, this book is as simple and brief as I could make it. This is the simplest summary and synthesis of all the relevant context and insights we are going to need to reach the kind of understanding where we get to outgrow everything that is keeping us small. These are the cliff notes of the full scope of what it will take to successfully change the course of history, to steer us to a place where our species breaks out of the escape room of insanity we have co-crafted in our ignorance and our cleverness. It is our imminent warning, our mirror, and our survival manual. The ideas in this book will one day change the world. The basic thesis. Evil does not exist and everything has meaning. The universe wants us not only to exist and flourish in our current state, but very specifically to evolve. If we really understand the implications of this, everything changes. And even if we just find the courage and sense to act as if this is true, we stand to lose nothing and gain everything. To be clear, it's not that suffering does not exist. It is that suffering has significant and non-trivial meaning. It is also optional. The world and all of existence and creation is dualistic. One way of framing this is being versus non-being, but that can be perplexingly difficult to articulate briefly, given the poverty of language rather than the poverty of reason. A simpler way is framing the duality as being one of love versus fear. The opposite of love is not hate, the opposite of love is fear. Our terminology of love is both expansive and limiting at the same time. We take love to mean the full complex range of human emotions and intentions which drive us to connect with, value, cherish, and seek to protect people or things. But it also assumes a very narrow band of human-centric emotional intentions and experiences. In terms of our duality, love is opening, expanding, connecting, and moving towards. Fear is the opposite, closing down, contracting, and withdrawing. The core and deliberate design of the universe, and all the complicit forces and the fractal relationships they have with each other, is to sustain and engender the progression from simplicity to complexity. The purpose is to enable, the means by which consciousness could manifest, and the universe could experience, witness, and contemplate itself. Our evolution up until now has been an intricate entanglement of iteration and variation, a long and arduous pilgrimage through matter, to enable consciousness, by design, to arrive embodied in gradual increments. The iterative nature of the design being essential to enable the inevitable outcome of producing a vehicle of sufficient consciousness and complexity to eventually override the default given nature and cross the great and imminent threshold. The combination of complexity and consciousness were in turn essential to enable the being to be able to reconcile its own intentionality with its own limitations. Once upon a time, our species were equivalent with animals, with the code and subject to the code. But that began to change when early humans took a fork in the road, this bifurcation point that gave us eventually Homo sapiens down one path and our distant cousins, chimpanzees and bonobos, down the other. It is not as if early humans had any idea of what we have become when they took those first unconscious steps. They simply responded to an impulse. All evolution between then and now has continued as unexamined responses to impulse. What this book is saying is that there were two impulses. One we followed, and one our distant cousins did not. They are still with us. It is not all or nothing. The increasing sophistication of our cultural and psychological operating systems are not a factor of the meat hardware, but rather our ability to start tinkering with our own code. This is a capability we are getting better at more quickly than we are getting wiser about. At exactly the same time as we are using all our newfound reach and cleverness to engineer an exciting new world, we are inadvertently engineering a pending existential crisis at the same time. The evolution of modern humans has been one of software, not hardware. Our recent and rapid increase in sophistication and complexity has been one of conscious awareness to keep pace with the social environment we are creating. We are not evolving new brains in the classic sense, as in our DNA changing through gradual environmental stimuli over generations, although that is undoubtedly still happening as well. At a much more rapid pace, which we can track by our artificial cadences like our news cycles, or the rate at which memes are generated and become stale within a couple of days, by configuring what is already there, our brains are nevertheless changing. Through neuroplasticity, the configurations of our brains and neural biology are changing and adapting, and this is happening quite rapidly and without adult supervision. Our evolution is one where our brains and central nervous systems are autonomically and constantly trying to adapt. Ironically, what we are adapting to is the demand that is being placed on us by the external phenotype, namely our technologically driven complexity of modern society that we are creating. In a very real sense, we are making our tools and shaping our reality. And in turn, our tools are making us, and our reality is shaping us. This is being done so rabidly and mindlessly that it is having the most disturbing consequences, and there is no reason to believe the ship is going to right itself. Our systems and tools we create to better control our environments, and the complexity we have created invariably end up shaping our behavior and therefore our psychology. At this stage of the game, it is something we absolutely need to keep doing, but we need to add a key missing ingredient: discernment. We are in a vehicle that we are improving in performance, but no one is really holding on to the steering wheel or scouting the road ahead. It does not matter how pleasant or amazing the place is we might come to. If we are not watching and actively steering, we will crash. No one is to blame, but we do need to assume responsibility. The fact that we did not cause something is no reason to not try and fix it. The fact that there are no simple solutions is hardly a sufficient reason to not spend time looking for some. The way we are employing our increased capacity for consciousness and the ingenuity that affords us is nevertheless being done in a manner that is unconscious of the relationship between cause and effect, and ultimately out of alignment with natural law. This is already costing us more than we are predisposed to notice. And if this is not prudent to start noticing, exactly who or what are we counting on to apply any necessary correction to our current vector? My argument is this: no one else is coming. Nature, at our level of complexity and consciousness, has a failsafe built in. Above the waterline of evolution, which distinguishes the kingdom of Animalia from the orders of other species we share the planet and possibly the galaxy with, the following holds true. When a species evolves to a degree when they can begin to really influence creation beyond the limits of their own biosphere, the failsafe is activated. When the extended phenotypes of technologies grant them a distended level of control, if not mastery over their planet, out of pace with the sense of stewardship of that parcel of nature, the self-destruct tendency will come along for the ride. Fundamentally, all our enterprise, all our cleverness and ingenuity is deployed in the service of fear, and its many refracted properties. We are motivated subconsciously by fear. We had to be. Without reason, without connecting to the greater meaning, all life can do to keep going is iterate beings that fear. We fear death and we fear other. All the will to live is built initially on these two fears. To live, we must fear death and anything that might lead to it, like injury or loss. And we must fear other, anything that by definition is not us. The simple dichotomy at the heart of our heuristics is the birthplace of tribalism. Tribalism was once our vehicle to survive the odds. But at our current level of complexity, noise, and distortion, the feature has become a potentially fatal bug. Tribalism selects for connection to optimize survival, and it is getting us divisiveness that is guaranteed to ensure annihilation. We fear not having enough to survive, because we both fear ending and ceasing to be. Therefore, we fear something that comes to potentially deny us what we need, or taking what we have away. Anything that is not explicitly for us, quarry, prey, or ally, is potentially against us, predator or competition. Therefore, by design, we fear the unknown. When the fear of stagnation overrides the fear of the unknown, we brave the unknown. Furthermore, for animals, instinct provides both the impulse to have enough and the definition of enough. For humans, we retained only the compulsion to have enough, and we lost, as we became self-aware, the intuition around what was enough. As we became more socially complex and our relationship with the natural world became more complex, as our archetypes and concepts became more complex, our fears became more complex. The same basic fears became refracted through the consciousness and interacted with the complexity contained in our consciousness. And now we have an expansive fractal array of fears and pains and discomforts, which are alike and yet different. Our psychological, social, and cultural operating systems are now so complex that our vigilance is hyper-aroused and the dualistic nature of our thinking is being overtaxed. This is because at this level of conscious expansion and complexity, the binary nature of the algorithms of life, we call dualism, cannot cope with the multivariate complexity and nuance we are trying to process. There are so many complex dangers, and the playing field of psychological survival is so multidimensional that our vigilance has been aroused to a state of hypervigilance. Vigilance, once hyper-aroused, is subject to a ratcheting effect. It does not de-escalate without venting or purging, and it does not auto-acquire only valid targets. Hypervigilance breeds hypervigilance. We can observe this from a neurological perspective in the human brain. When amygdala hijack occurs, the fear response is sufficiently aroused. The moderating effect of the prefrontal cortex, what we call our executive function, is rendered offline. In an environment of hyperstimulation, it is not incentivized or designed to come online again of its own accord. We have created for ourselves the very circumstances by which our human weaknesses could be overwhelmed by the potential signals of relevance indicating opportunity or danger. We have created for ourselves the economies of competition and interaction, which result with comical irony in our response to feeling overwhelmed, generating more distortion. Our attempts to navigate and reconcile the complexity is inherently flawed due to our unconscious and unchecked reliance of the lowest order of binary thinking of dichotomies. Our heuristic of attempting, in our state of fear and arousal, to categorize everything as death or other has resulted in polarized factions along every aspect of human life and interaction we have a name or a system for. We do not even notice that we try and classify everything into these binary sets. This heuristic is so deeply entrenched it is almost autonomic, but not quite. There is no unconscious way out of that game. The only cure for our runaway impetus is annihilation, or a similar order of severe setback, which reduces the complexity by reducing the population and the variables which contribute to social complexity. Our previous and current iterations at codifying the complexity of social operating systems, our isms, our religions and ideologies, are failing. They were systems designed in simpler times to manage simpler orders of complexity. There is one other way out: transcendence. The only solution to a lack of conscious intervention is conscious intervention. The answer to badly practiced science cannot be no science, it has to be better science. The answer to ineffective and dysfunctional ideologies of government is not no government at all, it has to be a better form of government. Similarly with money, social media and journalism, our instinct for binary thinking is to tear down or accept them as is, where neither option is workable. It has to be an evolution, not a revolution or a stasis. As much as we want to believe it, there is no binary-friendly answer to our challenges. The answer cannot be about how we pick a side or defeat a side. It has to be how we transcend the limitation of our dichotomies of thinking and pursue the third transcendent perspective by choice. All dichotomies at the right level of consciousness prove to be false dichotomies. Wherever an apparent dichotomy exists, especially a strong contested dichotomy, a third pervasive perspective exists. It is either an underlying fundamental or a third transcendent perspective in which the simplistic dichotomy is reconciled without the kind of rounding errors that rely on superstition or ideology to adequately resolve. This vector of transcendence is the same vector as actualization. We do not as humans need to become something other than what we are. We just need to become more authentically what we are. And what we are is not an eternal prisoner of a dualistic set of competing impulses. We do not need to be motivated forever from fear. Life is a signal. The signal has two sub-signals, being and non-being. Colloquially put, love and fear. If we knew what was waiting for us beyond the threshold of the impossible moment, we would immediately and enthusiastically abandon the smaller game. Our only limit is knowledge, and the only limit to our knowledge is cooperation. Our ability to extend the boundary of self from a single organism to a mate was the first act of connection nature bundled into the package. The next was where we pushed that boundary again to family, and then to tribe, then to village, then city, then state. We just need 2 more pushes. We have time. It is just much later than we think. The first significant threshold we faced as a species was the one where we moved from being equivalent with the code to the ability to dabble, albeit in an unself-aware manner, with our code. We invented the tools and organized ourselves in ways that we called civilization, and we were unaware as we pulled levers and pushed buttons what impacts they would have in our psyches in just a few hundred years. The shift was not simple, binary, that was one and done. It was iterative and progressive, and we did not notice it while we were doing it. Now, social media and other tech companies have worked out the mechanics, and they are pulling levers and pushing buttons to manipulate our psyches, and along with it, our behavior. The full extent of what they are doing is unknown even to them because they are unaware of the wider implications. The threshold we are facing now is the one where we move from dabbling unconsciously or maliciously to both a conscious and conscientious coder. The shift again will not be a simple binary of one and done. The skill and understanding required will still be attained gradually and incrementally. In fact, it will look like we are doing almost exactly the same thing, innovating, inventing, and discovering. The only difference will be an internal one, intention. Until now, nature has been turning all the dials. Regardless of how clever or industrious we think we are, we have not yet broken the waterline of this unconscious drive. That does not mean we cannot. It just means we have not connected yet with the possibility or the incentive to try. The incentive will arrive in the form of crisis. We are standing at the fork in the road of another great bifurcation point. Not everyone is going to make the cut. The one impulse is to keep leaning one way, keep on keeping on. The other impulse is to connect with something greater. What this book is saying is the outline of that incentive, the means by which we can begin to truly understand how we got here, how we are mired and wired, and how this makes it difficult for us to lift ourselves up by our bootstraps. Most importantly, what this book is saying is the incredible possibility that exists in the present moment, if we can simply find the sense and the courage to try. It is a sincere and heartfelt attempt to thread a needle between so much of what we already know and understand, and to weave those threads together in a way that makes the bigger picture harder to ignore. Above all, it reveals a vision of our future we absolutely want to get to, and that this bright future will be bright exactly and only if the better versions of ourselves can get there. The universe is perhaps as cold and meaningless as what some scientists claim, but that is not because there is no heart. Someone put us here after all. The endless dark is an invitation to bring light. The cold and graceless emptiness is an invitation to fill it with warmth. And more than hope, what we long for is inspiration. We are all voices, calling out from forever, out to infinity, trying to be heard when once free of lips and tongue. Note on duality and non-being. The terms duality and non-being used here are not what is meant by the Buddhist concepts they share the terminology with.